The biggest predatory dinosaur ever confirmed by science was almost lost forever, twice. The first time, a war reduced its only proven bones to ash inside a bombed museum. For 30 years afterward, this animal existed only on paper, rebuilt from a dead man's notebooks and a handful of surviving photographs. Then, decades later, new bones turned up in a different country and proved almost every page right. Its name is Spinosaurus, and this is its story. Spinosaurus belongs to a small, strange family of meat-eating dinosaurs called Spinosaurids, built less like a typical land predator and more like something that spent much of its life half in the water, with a long, low, crocodile-like skull running across every member of the family. Despite growing to a similar size as Tyrannosaurus, the two are not close relatives at all. Spinosaurus sits on a completely different branch of the dinosaur family tree, one that turns up on far more continents than most people expect. A smaller cousin named Baryonyx in England, another named Irritator in Brazil, and Spinosaurus itself in North Africa. Across the whole Spinosaurid family, only a handful of genera have ever been confidently named, which makes every new discovery in the group genuinely rare. It lived roughly 99 to 93 million years ago in a version of North Africa that looked nothing like the desert sitting there today. Wide, slow rivers cut through what is now Egypt and Morocco, carrying giant fish, crocodile-like hunters, and several other enormous predators along the same shorelines. The first Spinosaurus bones ever found came out of Egypt's Bahariya oasis in 1912, collected by a fossil hunter named Richard Markgraf, who was working for the German scientist Ernst Stromer, while Stromer himself had already returned home. The same stretch of desert would go on to yield several other giant dinosaurs over the following years, making it one of the richest Cretaceous fossil sites ever found in Africa. Stromer described Spinosaurus in 1915 from a lower jaw, a set of teeth, and a row of backbones carrying spines longer than anything ever recorded on a dinosaur. And he was careful enough to warn readers that a full picture of the living animal would have to wait for more material. He had the bones mounted in a Munich museum and spent years afterward warning that the collection needed to be moved somewhere safer, a warning that history would not treat kindly. Nobody acted on the warning, and on the night of April 24, 1944, an Allied bombing raid struck the museum and destroyed every original Spinosaurus bone inside it. For 3 decades afterward, everything known about this animal existed only in Stromer's surviving notes and sketches, since the specimen that proved his description was gone and there was no way to check any of it against the real bones. Some scientists doubted the sale was even real during those years, with no surviving bone left to settle the argument. Stromer's notes only became public again in the 1990s, donated to the same museum by his own family. Real Spinosaurus material would not resurface until a team working a very different patch of desert in Morocco began piecing together an entirely new skeleton almost from scratch. Long before that skeleton settled any argument about what this animal looked like, an even bigger mystery was already waiting. How a whole family of giant river-hunting dinosaurs like this one could disappear so completely that barely a trace of the ending survives. That Moroccan skeleton has its own strange origin story. In 2008, a young researcher named Nizar Ibrahim bought a small box of unusual fossils from a market stall, streaked with a distinctive purple stone nobody could place. A year later, in an Italian museum, he recognized matching bones from the same animal and spent years trying to track down the original seller to find out exactly where they had come from. In 2013, after days of dead-end searching, his team spotted the man by pure chance walking down the street, and he led them straight to the excavation site. That patchwork skeleton, finally described in 2014, is still the closest thing science has to a complete Spinosaurus, built from one individual filled in with matching bones collected from others nearby. Researchers now estimate the animal reached somewhere between 46 and 59 feet, or 14 to 18 meters, long, roughly the length of a bowling lane, making it the longest predatory dinosaur ever confirmed, longer than Tyrannosaurus, longer than Giganotosaurus. Estimates of its weight land between 6 and 9 tons, or roughly 5.5 to 8 metric tons, heavier than a city bus. Its skull alone stretched about 5 feet 9 inches, or 1.75 meters, roughly the height of a household refrigerator. Long and narrow like a crocodile's rather than deep and heavy like Tyrannosaurus's. The single strangest thing about Spinosaurus sat on its back, a row of spines growing straight up from its vertebrae, some reaching close to 6.5 feet, or nearly 2 meters, tall, about the height of a standard doorway. Skin most likely stretched between them, forming a tall sail rather than a loose flap of skin. Nobody agrees on exactly what that sail was for. Some researchers argue it was built for display, something bright and visible to another Spinosaurus even across murky river water. Others think it helped the animal shed heat in the North African sun, and Stromer's own original guess, long before any of this newer evidence existed, was that the spines instead held up a fatty hump rather than a true sail, closer to a bison's shoulders. No single explanation has fully won the argument yet, and the field has swung back and forth between them more than once. The rest of the body backs up a life spent largely in or near water. The bones were unusually dense for a dinosaur this size, closer to the solid, weighted bones of a manatee than the hollow, lightweight bones typical of most large theropods, likely helping it stay submerged rather than bob at the surface. Its tail was reshaped too. Instead of the stiff, narrow tail typical of a running predator, Spinosaurus carried a tall, flexible, paddle-shaped tail built for sweeping side to side through water. First confirmed in 2018 when researchers uncovered an 80% complete tail from a young individual near that same Moroccan site. A 2020 study tested that tail shape directly, dragging a model of it through a water tank and comparing its thrust against a crocodile, a newt, and 2 ordinary land-dwelling dinosaurs. The Spinosaurus tail beat both land dinosaurs badly and performed almost as well as the crocodiles. Not everyone accepts the full swimming picture, though. A separate study modeling the animal's lung position and overall body volume found its center of gravity sitting over its hips, the same balance point as any 2-legged land hunter, and argued it would have been unstable and prone to rolling onto its side the moment it tried to float. Whether Spinosaurus was an active swimmer chasing fish underwater or a bipedal wader that stood at the edge and struck is still being argued out today. Picture the world this animal actually lived in, broad river channels lined with dense green growth, cutting through what would one day become the Sahara, patrolled by crocodile relatives twice the length of a grown man, with giant flying reptiles wheeling overhead, wings stretched wider than a giraffe is tall. Spinosaurus shared its skull shape with living fish eaters like herons and crocodiles for a reason, and every part of that skull points toward the same job. Small nostrils sat farther back on the snout than on most predators, letting it breathe while the front of its jaws stayed underwater. Pressure-sensing pits lined the tip of its snout, likely able to detect the faint disturbance of a fish moving nearby in murky water. Turtles the size of a large shield drifted through the calmer stretches nearby. Its jaws were lined with straight, cone-shaped teeth that had no serrated edges at all, unlike the blade-like teeth of most meat-eating dinosaurs, and interlocked at the front of the snout to trap slippery prey rather than slice through it. One confirmed target was Anchopristis, a giant sauce-skate armed with a blade-like snout studded with backward-pointing teeth and measuring 7 to 14 feet, or 2 to 4 meters, roughly the length of a canoe from nose to tail. Coelacanths large enough to feed a family for a week, called Mawsonia, likely made up part of the same diet, alongside whatever smaller fish and crocodile relatives shared the channel. Spinosaurus was not the only giant hunter working these rivers. Carcharodontosaurus, a land-bound predator nearly as long, patrolled the same stretch of Cretaceous Africa alongside armored, mid-sized abelisaurids, likely hunting the large plant eaters living farther from the water, while Spinosaurus worked the shoreline itself, a strange 3-way arrangement scientists have nicknamed Stromer's riddle. That kind of division, different predators ruling different strips of the same landscape may be exactly what let animals this size coexist without directly wiping each other out. In February 2026, that picture got a genuine surprise. Researchers described a second Spinosaurus species entirely, found several hundred miles inland in Niger, in river country, far from any coast this animal was thought to need. Unlike its Egyptian relative, this inland species is thought to have fished in water only about 3 feet or roughly a meter deep, though it was heavy enough to stand safely in water up to 6 feet or nearly 2 meters deep without floating away. The researchers behind that discovery argue the whole Spinosaurid family evolved in stages over tens of millions of years, and that these two species mark the most extreme and most recent point of that trend. Spinosaurus and its relatives did not vanish in the same event that ended the age of dinosaurs. The asteroid that closed the Cretaceous struck around 66 million years ago, but the entire Spinosaurid family, along with Carcharodontosaurus and its relatives, appears to have vanished from the fossil record closer to 94 million years ago, a gap of roughly 28 million years, with no single catastrophe marking the moment, nearly 100 times longer than the whole span of time modern humans have existed. The kind of number that is easy to state and hard to actually picture. Even the newly discovered inland species comes from rock of almost exactly the same age, meaning both known branches of the genus appear to have gone quiet within the same narrow window of time. That gap is unusual. Most of the giant predators sharing its world lasted closer to the very end, which means whatever pushed Spinosaurids out arrived on its own timeline, completely unconnected to the disaster still to come. Nobody has a fully confirmed answer for why. One idea points to rising sea levels flooding the coastal floodplains these animals depended on, pushing saltwater into the freshwater channels where their prey lived and shrinking the rivers and marshes down to a fraction of their former size. Another points to competition, as smaller, faster, more adaptable predators like the Abelisaurids needed far less waterlogged territory, and may have simply outlasted animals built around one narrow way of life once that habitat began shrinking. A third idea simply notes that a body built this specifically for one kind of river life leaves very little room to adapt if that river life disappears. The giant fish these animals depended on for food may have struggled through those same changing waters, squeezing the whole food chain from both ends at once. To be honest, some of this apparent gap might simply reflect which rock layers happen to survive and get studied today, rather than a clean biological event, since the fossil record from this stretch of time is thinner than researchers would like. None of these ideas is confirmed over the others, and that gap in the evidence may never fully close. What's left is a picture with real gaps still in it, a family of river giants that thrived across several continents for millions of years, then went quiet more than 20 million years before the world around them ended, while smaller, land-bound hunters moved in to take their place along a coastline that kept redrawing itself. Now for my favorite part, a few fun facts your friends probably don't know. The 2020 tail study found the Spinosaurus tail produced up to 8 times more thrust than the tails of ordinary land-dwelling theropods, a huge gap for what looks like a fairly simple shape change. Spinosaurus also carried unusually large curved claws on its front limbs, especially an enlarged claw on the first finger of each hand, a feature usually linked to hooking or gripping slippery prey rather than running down animals on land. That second species announced in 2026, named Spinosaurus mirabilis, carried a dramatic scimitar-shaped crest on its skull, built from solid bone rather than the fragile air-filled crests seen on some other dinosaurs, and stretched close to 40 feet or about 12 meters long, roughly the length of a shipping container. Its discovery took years to come together. A single jaw fragment turned up at the dig site in 2019, and 2 separate matching crest pieces weren't found until 2022, with nobody realizing all 3 belonged to a brand new species until they were studied together. Researchers think the crest was likely for display rather than combat, since its shape looks too fragile to survive a real fight. And here is the strangest part. Spinosaurus mirabilis lived at the very same time as Spinosaurus aegyptiacus, hundreds of kilometers apart, meaning this genus was raising giant sail-backed river hunters in more than one place at once, a level of variety nobody expected from an animal known to science for over a century. So that's the dinosaur that had to be rebuilt from scratch. Twice over. Let me know in the comments which extinct animal you want to see here next. If digging into a mystery this deep is your kind of thing, a like and a subscribe genuinely helps this channel keep going. And until then, stay curious. Thanks for watching. Watch this video next and subscribe for more.